Welcome to session 5. And as promised, we will do a little bit on Node-RED today. And for this Node-RED stuff, so in the beginning I did it myself, but then after the lecture, students came to me, we had no idea what you did just now. So what I tried later was actually to ask 2 volunteers to help me here in front. And instead of letting me type on my computer, the 2 of you will actually type off your computer. Can I kind of motivate 2 persons here to join me here in front? So don't worry, you just have to execute things I tell you. Yeah, but you're basically my slow downer. 2 persons. You share the burden here and the glory. There's really nothing too critical. No volunteers? Well, if you ask for it, and while I do, then I will do it, but you will get the full load then. So, same task, you still have to help me. Else you would have helped your colleague. So we want to build a very simple flow, and we want to build this flow where we can send on into the flow and then kind of toggle a light. So often you have buttons, and when you press the button, it sends only, or you want to only react when the button gets pressed or when the button gets released. So how can we build something that turns that into some kind of switch, that one press turns it on, and another press turns it off. So basically we want to get as the output 0 and 1. Good, then your task is actually, because I will get stuck at some point, so you have to help me Google how you solve specific problems in Node-RED and provide solutions here. These go into the little research report, and you should also, which doesn't need to go into the research report, but take some notes because you want to use Node-RED today in the lab. So, okay, first, how can you start Node-RED? So usually you have with the Node.js environment installed it somewhere, and then you have npm in the terminal. You have then probably at one point put in npm install Node-RED. That's the same on all platforms. So somewhere in the terminal you have Node.js installed, and then you have installed that. And you also will have installed Node-RED dashboard. These are 2 things we need to do some stuff here in class. And then if you have done that, you can just start Node-RED. That looks something like that. Good. And we also need, so I don't have my Raspberry Pi set up, so we also need some Mosquito here. But I have my environment installed, and this is basically the same which happens on the Pi. I have a script which runs the Mosquito, and I can start with this with MQT broker. It's running as a user, so we have now 2 services running. We have Node-RED running and Mosquito running. And as you see, these are 2 services which actually run on your Raspberry Pi gateway you have. And if you have Node-RED started on the local, see? So the one command is just Node-RED. Yeah, so if you install Node-RED, you start it with node-red. Do you need it bigger? Sorry. Let's try it again. Node-RED. And here that's kind of a little weird. So you know that this kind of IoT environment you can start on the Pi has something to do with my framework. So you go into IoT, and then there are a couple of helper scripts you have. So if you go here in bin MQTT broker, you can see all the magic which is actually happening. So basically, it just starts the Mosquito server with a created configuration file. So you could also just start Mosquito by hand, but I have a handy script which does it. But it only works if you have the IoT Empower environment installed. Usually you would just start Mosquito by hand or have it installed as a system service, or you just use the Mosquito which is already running on the Pi. So, 2 services running. Don't need to be on the local computer, can be somewhere else, but as I'm presenting here in class, I'm running it now on the local computer. So, and then you just need a browser. On the Pi, I have a VL web server installed, which kind of forwards things to, depending on which URL you use, to different services. Here I have the native services installed, so usually when you install it locally, Node-RED comes up on port 1880. I think it also says that when it starts, somewhere in the beginning, it should somewhere say, I'm ready, and you can connect to, here, see, you connect to a local host on port 1880. So if you forget this, you can actually look into the output. And there we are. So there's some flows from me before. So in Node-RED, you have flows. These are here in the tab, in the tabs up here. So you see actually 3 parts. On the left, you see the different nodes. So basically the components a flow consists of. Then you see the different flows you have. And usually if you start it the first time, you will be greeted by an empty flow. And then we see here extra information to the things we have. The nice thing actually in Node-RED is, so if I click on something, you see you get a tiny little help here. So the documentation in Node-RED is actually really nice. So you always have what you are doing right available here on the right-hand side. But be careful, it's not always visible, so this little eye here has to be selected. There's a little bug here. So there you can see debug messages. And if you have the GUI installed, you have a dashboard controller here too. We will come to that later. So, but mainly interesting for you in the beginning is the help. And see if I click here on different nodes, it describes in the help what these nodes are actually doing. So we will start, before I go into the actual task for today, I will show you the simple example we also saw in the presentation by Kai Wenner. So you have, for testing, a so-called inject node. Yeah? It's an inject node basically generates something when you press the little clip here on the side. And I showed you already that the debug is interesting. So we have to, and then as it's a flow, somewhere have inputs. So as you see, this inject one is an input. And then we have some things, some output or input or source. And then we have things or output where information flows. And the information usually flows from left to right. So, and to make the information flow, we have to connect these two. And then the whole cycle in Node-RED is always that you press deploy then afterwards. So if this button here is red, it means you have made a change and you can deploy. There's even some nice team management, so you can actually open even the Node-RED page with several persons, and it will say you, hey, it has been edited, you have to do a merge. So in principle, you can even work in the team with one Node-RED instance. Do a little bit of manual synchronization, but usually it protects you, and you can actually edit 2 flows at the same time. So if you look here, you can actually make a new flow, and you could say, hey, you work on flow 1, I work on flow 2, and usually you can synchronize that at the time. So if you want to delete a flow, you double click on the flow and you find the button up here, delete. So we have our great program now, which actually sends a timestamp when I press this little button. So I have to go on the debug field to see that it's empty. And when I press now here on this little square, which is next to it, see, then it says successfully injected, and there we get a timestamp in seconds since 1970 in Greenwich Mean Time, and then you can parse this to get a real date out of this. But it's basically the second. So if I do it a couple of times, you can see there we get different tabs out there. Okay, so now we can start configuring things. Yeah. So I usually don't like the timestamp. So like Kaivana, he kind of transferred the date, but I usually want to insert something specific. Yeah. So I can actually say I want to insert not a timestamp, but a string, and I say hello world. Okay, you can double click. Yeah, double click on the specific node, and then you can configure it. And again, so if you click the little info tab here, you get an explanation of all the inputs you actually have here. So now I can, so in the beginning I had as the payload. So why payload? Payload is the thing which is sent around, but it's not only that is sent around. There are some meta informations which are sent around too, kind of from which node was it sent, what is the ID of the sender, what is the ID of the receiver. So basically there are big JSON objects kind of sent around here in Node-RED, and you usually are just interested in the payload. Payload is basically the message, the data which is sent around, but there sometimes is some meta information you want to access to. So kind of think a little bit, this is a JSON object, but we usually just in the object are interested in the payload. So, and I say, no, I want to send, sorry, not in a topic, I want to send in a string, hello world. Yeah, I can write this in there, then I say done, and now we can see, oh magic, first I have to deploy. And now if I inject, see, we get hello world in the debug. Right, nothing special yet. Okay. You can also use this inject node to repeatedly trigger things. Yeah, so you can also say, I want repeat this in a specific interval, and I want to send the hello world here every second. So I do that, and you see here a little icon that this is now a repeated injector. And I would actually say, I want to automatically start this one. I don't want to touch it with my finger. After deploying, I want to, after 0.1 seconds, start injecting nodes. So if I deploy this now, you will see that each second here starts sending hello world. It's kind of nice. You can build a test with this, which triggers automatically this at a time. It also works, so you can also, actually I think, not with this one. There's one node where you can also at a specific time trigger an event. Say at 5 o'clock you want to execute something like a cron job on a Linux machine. Here. Interval between times, and at a specific time we'll use cron. Okay, so instead I can say here at a specific time, and there you can see, you can actually say, okay, make some kind of alarm or something that happens once a day or once a week. You can do that also with the inject node. So inject node pretty powerful, both for testing and for actually starting things automatically. So now we said, but we get the message from outside. Yeah, so we want to somehow talk to MQTT here. So, this handy thing, if you go up here and filter nodes, so of course you can just browse the nodes. Yeah, so you can look here. But if you don't find it or want to be fast, you can also just type in here. And we type in MQTT, and there we get an MQTT input, which is kind of like a subscribe, and an MQTT output, which is like publish. Are we too fast? Are there kind of some questions in between? So I think mostly all concepts we have done already, so this should kind of prepare you. So instead of the trigger, so I will, you can actually disable the trigger. No, I cannot. I just remove it. So we take now, we take an MQTT in instead. And you see, here's my Raspberry Pi server already in there, but I don't have my Raspberry Pi server. So we have to check which other servers I have, and there's one local host. But you might have to configure a new server. So let's check what we can configure. So if we go into the configuration, you can see here you can set the data for actually connecting to the Pi. But don't worry, if you do the Node-RED on the Pi, this is pre-configured for you. But if you want to use your computer, so your desktop with Node-RED to connect to the Pi, you have to put this data in. So you have to give the IP address of the Pi. The port is the default port for MQTT, so it should be the only thing you should enter is the IP address. Or if you're on macOS or Linux, you can also put a name in here. And the Windows has a little trouble in doing the local name resolution.
Now for testing?
I think, so if you really follow along, you have a Mosquito running on your local computer? I think you continue working with the inject node. Yeah, so you use the inject node because you don't have a Mosquito or an MQTT running. But you can send everything I receive via MQTT manually. So, okay, I leave also so that you can follow along. I make also an inject node, so I tell you what comes here. Then we have the testing in the inject node. And so we wire now both of this to this here. And so again, in MQTT, I have to say I want to use my local host. Yeah, so usually you would use the Raspberry Pi. Now here in the lecture, I use the local host. And now we can specify a random topic. We can, for today, we can just take test. Or we can actually say we take test and everything underneath. Yeah? So you might have discovered in MQTT this pound sign or hash sign is a wildcard for saying everything underneath. Good, so I deploy that. And we can empty the log. So, and you know that with Mosquito Pub, you can actually send things to a server. Again, I will use a small script I have there. So I show you the content and make this a little bigger. So if you look at IoT, this is also on the Pi, IoT binary MQTT send. You see the sending is actually executing Mosquito Pub. So there's basically a command line for sending a message. So you can also do this with MQTT-FX. But I will use this here now. Good. So, no, cancel. So I will use MQTT send. And if I call this alone, I think it gives me a little help. So MQTT send needs a topic and a message. So we do an I have to do Mosquito direct. Sorry guys, because I don't have the Pi available. So I do a Mosquito pub to the host, local host, and with the topic test and the message hello world. That's not good. Oh, why not? My MQTT doesn't run. Same issue because I don't have the. I have to run an access point for that. So I don't have the network interface I usually run this on. You don't need that. Only if you run my framework on your local computer. So I'm creating an IoT Empower network. So if you check your Wi-Fi connections, you see now that I'm hosting actually a local Wi-Fi network. You hopefully don't know the password of that one. Else you could connect to my computer. And then could you use my Mosquito server. But so let's make that a little bit bigger. So, and now I can run the MQTT broker, and then we can do the little test I wanted to do. So now see, now it's running and not complaining. And so let's minimize that. We should now be able to, here, to send something there. So let's do a hello world, and yeah, we send it. And we should see, we got this hello world here. So because I use this subtopic, which one? Yes, this one. I can also send it not only to test, but also to test sub. And see, you get still the message here. And the cool thing is actually, as this is a JSON object which is sent, so if you go here on the debug, you can say you want not see the message payload, but you want to see the complete message object. You can even then see the topic to which it was sent. So we deploy that again, and I send another message. See, then we get here a JSON object. You can open that up, and there you see the topic that it was actually sent to test sub, else you don't know. So with this, you can basically just have one listener and then parse different topics and do something depending on to which subtopic things were sent. Make sense? So if you have one device which has different switches, you can of course just copy this MQTT input node, but you can also and have different topics listed there, but you can also do a little bit of JavaScript and then parse it. I say JavaScript, that's the same thing what here our what Kai showed. So you can take actually a function and edit in between, and in here we have the whole power of JavaScript in here. So we can, for example, say message payload should be message topic. Yeah, so I'm basically overwriting that, and now I can just show the message payload, deploy that, and if I send those things, I will get the topic. See, now I have the main thing which comes in here as the topic, and so if I do something else here in the topic, you can see I just get the topic. So can someone magic, I can rewrite. So I use the JavaScript nodes a lot for rewriting. So a good style is actually say in the name, then say, yeah, we put topic to message. Else you will never be able to read your own Node-RED code. No, you shouldn't do that. If you want to save things, if you want to put it into the Git repository as code, you can select the code you want to save, like this. And then you can go to export. And then see, we have here the beautiful JSON code of what I just did now. And you can also do that as formatted, then you can read actually a little bit more what is going on in here. So somewhere here, see the payload, which I actually, the rewrite for the JavaScript, and you see the definition of the broker in there. And that you can import somewhere else, or you can use that just for making backups. So you should do that. Save your Node-RED code in between, because at one point your Raspberry Pi will fail and somehow all your data is lost. So we don't want that. I taught once here the system administrators class, and one of the funnier parts in the lecture is backup strategy. So the three most important backup the three most important, I took the joke away. The three most important strategies for system administrators, and it's first backup, second backup, and third backup. Yeah, so everybody of you should know that this is the most important thing if you deal with data and computers is backup, backup, and backup. Just a side note. Okay, so I think we are ready to actually embark on the task which I set here for us. Still no volunteers? So what shall I do? So is the task clear? So I want to receive something on a trigger or an MQTT input, and I want to convert that into some kind of toggle. So I want to give it a state. What can I do now? Okay. So I get from an external thing, I get on or off, yeah? And on means I have pressed the button, and off means the button is released. And when I get an on, I want to toggle a state. So what would it do? See, I'm just like your colleague now. I'm sitting here in front, I'm totally lost. We can also make a mistake, so we can also try something. Oh. No, we're not giving up. So if you had Node, or you have Node-RED probably running on your computer, so what looks promising for you? So we're getting now here on test, we're getting on or off send. No? So I can do that. So we can send here on, let's say that is the test button. Yeah. We're setting on, we're sending off. And so let's make it simple. So we actually use here not the subtopic stuff, we just use test button. This is how it will look later in your thing. And also the timestamp thing here can generate, so you can do that locally for you. We say here not generate a timestamp, but we say just generate on. Yeah? And so if I deploy, so this one I can remove. Ah, no, not everything. It has an undo. So I take this and put it back in here. And so I can now either generate the on from here. No. Ah, not on the topic, but on. So. And now I can generate on here, or I can generate an on via sending this via MQTT. So we have that here. So now we want to do something with this on. Shall we program it? Well, we have JavaScript. JavaScript has states, and so let's just take a function here. So the problem is there's no one really perfect way for doing that. So what we need is we need a state. We need something to save a variable, some kind of global variable in Node-RED. So maybe you could help me Google a little bit how we can make kind of a global variable in JavaScript in Node-RED. I can give you another keyword. I think it's called context. So we say something like if message is on. Yeah, then we do something. Message payload, sorry, message payload. What should we do then? Now we should look at the internal state, and if the internal state is off, we should switch it on. If the internal state is on, we want to switch it off. But how do I get an internal state? Well, probably what do I need to write behind this equal sign?
This dot context.
Dot.
Yeah, dot flow. Flow. Maybe.
I'm not sure if I need this, but we can try. And then, so how can I create a variable in this context? Isn't there something like I have to read? Or is there states? Or what do I have in there? Your colleague would be totally desperate now, yeah? So, hey, there are tons of examples. So find one example how you can read and write a state.
Context.get.
Just context.get, yeah, and then a name, yeah?
Yeah.
Do I need this?
No.
No.
Don't think so.
Get, and I get, it's like this, yeah? So I get, and then context get, what do we say? Toggle state. So, and then if state is, because this might fail, so it might actually be not existent. So if we say if state equals, why don't we say if it is 1, we say state should be 0, and else. Actually, we can even do that with non-strings. Okay, and then we will actually return. So we also set message.payload equals state, and we have to write the state. If we change the state, we have to write that back. So I think it's context.set, yeah? Context set. We have to say toggle state to state. Let's see if that works. Let's call that thing here toggle. Have you seen it? Do you need some time to try it out? Have you verified? Does it work? I don't know yet.
How should we do that? How should we do?
You deploy and you use the trigger. Here, so we say done, we say deploy, and we look. There's 1, 0, 1, 0. Yeah! Cool, isn't it? Okay, you want to check again? What does it say? When you undefined, then it means you probably have used a double equal instead of a triple equal somewhere.
Can you show the on inject again, please?
Yeah, the on inject is just sent on in the payload. But I made a mistake in the beginning, and I kind of always tempted to write the payload into the topic.
Yep, I did that.
Welcome to my world. You can actually, it actually gets then a message topic. So if you look here in the explanation, you can see topic is just another property. So we can use that also to do some things. Kind of when you send it then out to MQTT again, you could basically set the payload and the topic where it is sent out to already here. Good. Does it work now? Do you need to see something else? So the people who are following along can replicate. Shall we try if it works also via MQTT? Let's see if we see the debug while I send stuff here. So I send on, and I send on, I send on. So I can actually via network now have a toggle. So you can now imagine if we define a button which sends on and off, I can use that to actually switch on and off an LED. So basically our hello world from the beginning would be very easy to implement now if we have the two things defined in MQTT. Of course, you would say, I can send that directly, but again, we want to use integrators because we have a lot of things at one point to integrate. Any idea what could go wrong still here? So imagine we have a little Vimos which sends on kind of all the time while you press it. Or maybe it kind of makes a reminder, so every 5 seconds it sends the status it has. What would our logic now do?
Turn it on and off.
Turn it on and off. And so now you don't want that. You want actually, even if you hold it, that it only toggles once. You have any idea how we could prevent that?
With a Boolean problem, Boolean variable. And the first time we go into on, we set it true, and if it's true, we do nothing.
No, but what needs to change so that it kind of switches again?
Yeah, only execute the if, and then always.
No, so it sends on and off. So we basically have to get one off in between to register a new on. So we have to release the button, and only if you press the button again, it should work. So, but you don't need any match, so be careful. So JavaScript is powerful, but Node-RED is powerful too. So there are some things, before you implement things in JavaScript, check out if there isn't something ready-made for you. So let's see. We have now used the generic function, and I can tell you there is no toggle, so that's why we implemented a toggle together. But there is something which allows us to only pass through messages that have changed. So look with me if there's a function node which can actually do that for us, that it only continues sending a message if there is a new message coming. Yeah, so if we get lots of ons, it will not forward it, but if we have a change message, it should. So is it switch? Let's look, what does switch do? Info. Huh? Switch. Info. Yeah? So root message is based on their property values or sequence position. Nah, I think that's not it. Change. Set, change, or delete properties of a message. Also not. Range. Numeric value to a different range. Also not. Template doesn't look like it. Delay trigger doesn't look like it. What is RBE? So report by exception node. Only passes on data if the payload has changed. Why don't we take the RBE node? So instead, we do that. Let's see. Now, when we look on the debug here and press here and send this, you see it switches once and then it doesn't. I guess we need an off injector too. So we need a string. We need to send off and need to be able to send something else. So we need to say, so on, nothing happens, but let's see if we inject off. Okay, we made a mistake. So if you send off, and now if you send once off, you send on again, it switches. So now we have to do an off and an on, and then we switch. Is it clear what I'm doing? Because I saw some. So basically imagine we have a button which sends on when I press it and off when I release it. But however, when I keep holding it, it sends every 5 seconds another on just to give it status. And I don't want that then my lamp or so is toggling. So that's why I do this. Okay, you have to release it once so that it sends one off in between, and then it can only switch. So maybe it's clearer when I use the MQTT. So I send on, switches now. I send on again, nothing happens. So every 5 seconds it is sent. So but as soon as I send one off, still nothing happens. But then if I do an on, I toggle it again. Magic. Okay, let's first kind of send that out to MQTT. Yeah. Let's send that away. And here in MQTT, we can again select our local host, and we send it out to maybe our switch. And in the switch, we send a set message. That is just a convention. You could just send it to switch, but you will later see that often when we change data on MQTT, that there's kind of a set topic for something. So we send that to switch set. And deploy that. Let's verify that. So if we now look here at our MQTT, and then we need a listener. Do I have a listener? No, I don't have a listener. So we need another terminal. And we have to run MQTT. Oh no. Can we do that? Yeah. MQTT listen. So it's now listening here. And let's see when we send on. We send on and we get a 1 on the switch. Let's send another on. So you see you get the on sent via MQTT, but not another switch set. So we have to send an off. See, we send off. Switch is still 1. Now we send an on again, then it should switch back to 0. So now we have an integrator built in Node-RED. So that's basically the task you need to do. Maybe already last time, but definitely today you should be able to build this to connect your switch and your temperature sensor. So when you build later your temperature sensor, what kind of node do you think you want to use for making the decision? Temperature too warm or temperature too cold? You can use JavaScript. You can do the function node, but anything here which looks fun? You can actually use a switch node. And in the switch node, you can say if something is bigger as something, then it goes to output port 1, and then you can add another port here. Say if it is smaller or equal, then it goes to another port. And see, now you get here 2 ports. So you can say continue flow here or continue flow there. And depending on that, you can do different decisions. But this you will figure out yourself. Is that okay? Think you can do it based on the switch node? I can now say one of these things goes to something which then sends on, and one of these goes to something that sends off. So you can actually then use a switch node. No, not a switch, a change node. And this change node can just say, change my data to set the payload to on. And you have another change node. Should probably say here, set to on. And you have another one which does set to off. Good, let's do some graphical user interfaces. For the people who install Node-RED locally, on your computer, there's some really nice way of installing packages. I told you that you should do on the command line npm install Node-RED dashboard, but there's something nicer to do that. I have to find it again. So, and this is kind of, yeah, you should go to manage palette. Oops. And you have internet connection, unlike me. Then you then you can go to install and can search for some. You could then, because if you had internet, you could then search for something. And there's, for example, some nice aggregator and filter nodes. There are semaphores. Yeah, so if you want to do the global synchronization stuff, there's some kind of semaphore things. And so you can install different packages here directly from here. So I think if I look here, you see actually that the dashboard shows up here as one of the modules I installed. You could, I'm not sure if you can uninstall it from here, maybe if the no node is actually using it. There's kind of nice statistics. You can actually see which of my nodes are using the dashboard. So, but the dashboard is basically what I want to use now. So if you haven't installed the dashboard, install it via the palette. If you are kind of on a Raspberry Pi, kind of install Node-RED somewhere on a server, you want to use npm install to actually do it. So if you have dashboard installed and you scroll down, you should see different elements here. And so again, you guys put in your notes in the report, and kind of, especially if you find the links, so you just found something, how to use the context, that is a link I would expect to list in the research. Or Martin, you had a lot of questions. Put these questions in the research report. That's fine. So that's kind of the commitment for today. So I like that. And before I do the GUI, I have something for you guys. What's that? Think you have now enough information to kind of understand what this thing does, even if you don't know the batch node. Any ideas? Does it remind you? So if you think in terms of electronics, have any, because you see these kind of weird loops up there? There's something, if you draw circuits and logics and logical electronics, which looks very similar. Do you guys have ever built a flip-flop? And does it remind you a little bit of a flip-flop with the lines? So this is the same thing we just did in JavaScript without JavaScript. So this is a toggle. So what this thing actually does, so if you want to do something funny, I don't know when I did that just to make a point. I wanted to say you can do a toggle in Node-RED without using any JavaScript. Not that this is it's definitely more elegant, but if it's more efficient, I don't know. But so what's actually happened here, so you know that one, it sends the on or off, or it sends kind of the toggle command. And it waits basically for having two messages saved for making a decision. Yeah, so it waits here, it collects two messages, and then it sends, so it does the feedback to basically have, so basically with this memory in the batch, which kind of collects always two messages, I have the memory effect. So, and then I can actually decide based on what the batch here collects, if it goes in the off loop or if it goes into the on loop. Then it needs to always feed two values in here, and based on the last two values I collect, I can make the decision into what I have to toggle. So if you have fun, you can implement that yourself. Or maybe you find even a better solution of doing a toggle without JavaScript. And I would be very interested to know about that. Yes. So as promised, we do some GUI. So there are the things you want to probably, and I try to do it in this order here, but I might derivate. So for the research report, while I do that, you want to think where you want to use the GUI, yeah? So think when I do some things that, yeah, that would be good. In our scenario, maybe we need kind of a little dash for showing that. So maybe think in the scenario, in terms of the scenarios you did already, and think of maybe somewhere there's a mini sub-scenario where this would apply, what I actually show you. And help me, yeah? So maybe to stick to my order here and do stuff. So I said here I want to do a button first, yeah? So instead of using here these triggers, I can use a button. So let's take a button. And in the button, we can, when it is pressed, generate a payload. Yeah, we can call it Knopf. I say, let's say, push me. Good, and so the UI of Node-RED is usually at the Node-RED link. That also works on the Raspberry Pi, so some people of you have actually run it. So, and you add /UI behind there. And then you need to deploy before you see something. Because at the moment I don't have any. See, and now we have push me. So, what was the next thing I want to show? Switch? Doesn't work for you? Where are you working on? Haha. Because you don't have an environment yet. So you will have to go and push me. And you don't have this home default stuff here, do you? Okay, you have to then make a new one. So I show you, you can basically admit all the defaults here. And I think you also have to create a new tab. So I think first you have to edit this new, and then you have to click again here and say also that this should be created. And then you say update all of the, or kind of create all this stuff. So you basically need both a group and a tab. Does that work for you guys? So, and then if you have a group and a tab and deploy, you should be able to see your button. Of course, so I can do a couple of push me's here now, and we should see, maybe open the listener. No, of course, that's pretty stupid, because if I push, I send on, and I have now this stuff that the off is actually sent in between. So, why don't I cheat a bit? And I send that toggle directly without the limiter into the toggle. So now we should be able, so let's empty this debug out and see what is going on if I use the UI. Do a couple of push me's, and then I should see here 1 0 1 0 1. Of course, it would be kind of nice to have a visual feedback now of that in the board. You have an idea how I could visualize that? The switch? If we look at my next task, maybe we should use a switch. Let's take a switch. Switch. And so we Put the debug down there. And we feed that into the switch. We call this, what is that? That's our AC unit. And then we have to be careful. So you can now do weird things with the input. Yeah. So we are more interested actually in what goes in now than what we can send out. So a switch can also send out different two states, but you can also reset your switch. And this doesn't actually matter. Yes. So we have to switch off here this, that it pass this through. So there's actually a mistake here, spelling mistake. And so we basically want to switch this, and we want to use different payloads. We want to use the payload on and off. And I think that's all. Yeah, so you have to not pass through so that it actually uses the state it gets on its input. And then we have to change the payload because we didn't use true. We use 0 and 1, yeah? As number. Sorry, so it's a number. So the on payload is 1, and the off payload is 0. So careful with the types. Done. And why is that upset still? Eh? That's weird. Maybe numbers are not possible. So 1. Okay. 0. It looks fine to me. Done. Okay. Seems like numbers are not possible. Maybe it can do true false because it's kind of the same as 0 and 1. Let's try that. Okay, that works. And now let's deploy and see if that actually does work. Push me? No, it doesn't work. I think we have to translate the 0, 1 into true false. So we can do that with, what's the best? Is that range? Nah. Maybe change. To change. Yes. Maybe that's the issue. Very good point. Let's try that. That's the help I need. Where? Of course, input. Yeah, I forgot that. You have to do that too. So number, and then we have on is 1, and 0 is false. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and see now you can control our air conditioning unit, or at least see the status of the air conditioning unit. You can do, I think you can do fun stuff in terms of, yeah, so you can actually do your own icons for showing the, so you can use some of these MD Angular icons in here to show the states, and then it looks nicer. Can have a little Unicode symbol and work with this. Let's do color. How does color work again? There's the material design icons you can use. And font awesome. But how can I set the color again? I don't know if I can actually use real values. Let's say green and red. Ah, sorry. Well, no. Maybe that only works for the icon. Ah, yeah. See, now the check mark is green. And then it's red. Green and red. Green and red. I don't know if you have a, maybe we have a lamp or a light bulb. I don't know the codes for the, no, not really. We have a question mark. Yeah, so you can kind of make it pretty if you want to, and can have it. What does it suggest? Material design icons, check and close. Fire. I'll leave it empty. No, let's do the check mark. So, next thing I want to show. We have buttons, we have switches. You can also use the switches as input. Yeah? So switch is just regular kind of sending on or off. And then you can use that to have a switch for turning on. So we could actually send this now again into the output of the MQTT. And then we could use the switch also when we just do the switch to switch on and off something. Sliders. Sliders kind of cool. They both can show, again, kind of a value range, or they can create a value range. Nice for testing. So let's take a slider. Dashboard. Ah, it's closed. Take a slider. First, let's see how the slider works. And you can say volume. And we can say the range. Maybe want some more values. And we're just sending the values out. Let's try. And see, now we have our volume slider here. And when we now look in the debug, we should see lots of values. No, we didn't, because we didn't scroll down. Ah, yeah. See, here are the values from the slider. Lots of values for the slider. So what can we do with that? We can use that to pipe into something else, because I want to actually show you also gauges and charts. So let's take a gauge and a chart. Take our volume slider and pump that into a gauge. And the gauge, so I said from 0 to 100. And then the chart is also from 0 to 100. And then we can deploy that. See, now you have the gauge. Huh? Back to the chart. Also in the chart, I just say, in just the chart, I also just say that the y-axis is from 0 to 100. Everything else I leave like this. Which is not such a great thing to do. So we want to actually probably also limit the number of points we see in here, because if you send too much points into a JavaScript thing, it will clog down your computer. So the Angular charts are not so efficient. So your server will be fine, Node-RED will be fine with that, but your browser might actually complain if you have too many points in charts. So that's kind of a wise thing to limit that to maybe the last 10 minutes of data and maximum 100 points. But for now, I think as we are creating the input manually, it should not matter. So let's check that out. See, now I feed this data, which I generate here, into the chart and the gauge. So you will see actually the next project you guys, or the first project you guys are doing, has a lot to do with measuring. It will measure distances, weights, and stuff. And it's really nice if you have this feature and kind of can visually see how your devices react when you do the measurement. So instead of then wiring this input in there, you will wire an MQTT input in there and then see directly what the device is sending to you. You can also directly go in there and create your own graph. Easy, isn't it? That's one of my favorite features, is that actually, because it's so fast to have some little thing which shows you some statistics or a graph. It's super easy for prototyping. Okay, the GUI kind of starts getting a little bit cluttered, doesn't it? Yeah, so you might actually want to have different pages in the graphical user interface. And you can do that too. And you have this little dashboard controller up here. See, so I have actually defined two groups here. One is the home group and one is the testing group. And in there I have different tabs. So let's, in the home group, sorry, I have two tabs, and in there are groups. Yeah. So I have the default group in this tab, so I make a new group in here, and I will call that extra. And now I can take here my things which are in there. There's a bit more because I have more floats, but we have here our volumes thing and the gauge and the chart. So I will take the chart and move the chart in the extra group. And then we will see in the GUI what that means. See, now you have kind of a little bit of a grouping in here. But you can also, instead of putting it into another group, we can also make a new tab. Let's make a tab and call that tab here special. And in special, we need also a group, and we call that the special group. Now we take the charge and move that into the special group. And see, now we have here the special group, and we can select home here. Yeah? So we can on the left-hand side. So this is two ways of grouping your GUI elements. And yes, in your final project, you might have a lot of these. The nice thing is this, you can also put this URL into your phone, and it gives you actually really nice formatted page also on the phone. So the GUI you build here works well both on, or works basically on tablets, on phones, and on normal browsers, on desktop browsers. It's kind of nice because you might want to use the phone in the project setup you do. It's also nice, and as I said, one of the tasks I wanted you to use is the color picker, and then use the color picker to send stuff. I can quickly demonstrate the color picker too. So we put the color picker, just look what it outputs. And I put the color picker into the special group. No. And see, you have now here this color thing, and so you can actually select colors here. And now we should get tons of values in the debugger. Actually, no, you can either say it sends it at the end or while you slide. So I send it in the end. And see, this is the hex value I want your component you built with the RGB LED to consume. So let's say even funnier is if you do multiple values during editing. And so if we do now a color picking, see, you get lots of color values. And so if you have that connected to the RGB LED, you basically see directly while you slide on the phone, on the color picker, which color you change. So it's a pretty cool effect. Okay, do you think that gives you a small start? Let's kind of very quickly go through the things which are here on the left side, because I wanted to give you a little bit tips and tricks in Node-RED. So you know what the inject node is, you know what the debug node is. I have actually have never used the complete complete node, but you see here it's a flow when another node completes its handling of a message. So you can have basically some things that react if something in your flow happens. So both the complete and the catch are kind of debug nodes. You probably don't need at the moment. What I actually use is often is the link in and the link out. So you can, as you see, I have different flows here, and you can link these flows with this. So you see already what I do here gets kind of messy, and sometimes you don't want everything in one flow. You want to have several flows, but you still want them to communicate with each other, and this is where you can use the link nodes. This is basically, you can of course use MQTT too, but if you want an internal link between the flows, you use link in and link out. Very good is also using comments, which is just what you see here. So this is a comment, and here is more info. And you can just plug them somewhere in there so you know what things are about. Then function node we have talked about. Switch node we have also used. So if you want to reroute messages depending on their values. Change node is important if you want to transform a value into another. Range is more mathematical, kind of you have kind of transfer a value from an interval to another one. Yeah, the template nodes are another way of changing nodes quickly. And I'm not a super JavaScript expert. I don't know if you guys have done mustache templates. Does that ring a bell with you guys? It's another way JavaScriptish to specify it's like a little bit like regular expressions, but easier. So if you look at examples in Node-RED, you will very often find the templates node because it's kind of a simple way to transform strings. Yeah, so you might stumble upon them, but I usually refer to using real JavaScript if I want to do what is happening in a template. So the delay node is actually something really cool. So with the delay node has a function. So usually it just delays a message. So you can actually create a loop with that, which does something every second. So you take a message which is circled around, and then you take one of the outputs with it. And with this, you can actually create a loop and trigger something. We can also do that with a delay message, but with the trigger message. But basically, you can rebuild that with the delay. But what is even more important, it has rate limit. So with the delay node, you can make sure that there's not too much data going in. So you can forget data. Especially if you want to do a chart that makes a lot of sense. You can say you want just to have one new point per second, or maybe just one new data point per minute, and then say that all the intermediate messages are dropped. Very, very handy node. The trigger is very similar to the inject node, and I usually take the inject node for creating events, but you can use the trigger too, to actually, I don't know. It's you can always usually use the inject node for achieving what I do in the trigger. So I've used that in the beginning, but I think you usually want to use the trigger node. Want to use the inject node for the trigger stuff. So exec is kind of neat. Exec, you can just execute some command line stuff. If you want to start a service or just have something which is working on your Windows, Linux, or Mac command line, you can just call it. So you can start a program, you can start a video. This is what you can do with the exec node. So I have installed the semaphore stuff. This is an extra package. Pretty important if you want to do some synchronization. The RBE node we discussed. MQTT in, MQTT out we also discussed. And see, here you have the normal web requests. You can also do what you have done to start. You can actually make a URL and based on the URL trigger something, or you can send something to if this and that, with actually doing an HTTP request. You can work with WebSockets, so everything which is out there in the web works. If you want to use Telegram, I think there's actually a separate Telegram module where you can, which you can insert here. There's TCP in, TCP out, so normal socket operations, UDP in, UDP out, normal UDP operations. So all of these kind of work very, very similar. This one you will not have installed. I have installed some audio modules, which is kind of nice because you can combine that with the dashboard and then you can send an audio message to the GUI which you actually have. And so you can say, hey, thank you for opening this website, and or if you press a button, you can make noise on the UI. That's a lot of fun. Yeah, the sequence nodes are for dealing with lots of data. So you can say it's a little bit like the flow operations, which are kind of the flow tools, which are discussed in the beginning. So always if you kind of need to say one message goes there, then another there, so you can kind of distribute messages over it. You can split differently tagged data. So it's kind of dealing with lots of data and then making different streams out of it. You can, you have parsers, so you can actually feed JSON. So you can create JSON and read JSON and turn it into different messages, or just parse it. You have YAML, you have HTML, CSV. What is very nice is there are lots of database backends. So you can also write things directly to the hard drive or read things from the hard drive. And, or audio files. And there's one more thing you might need at one point, which is the dashboard template form. So basically in the dashboard template, you can use any Angular construction in there. So if you want to display a table, because there is no thing for a table, you can use real Angular and then feed the output of a database into that. So anything what you're missing in terms of graphical stuff, you can realize with this template. Okay, so that's this, and 5 minutes left. Okay, I will talk a little bit about Flogo, but not go into Flogo yet, but I show you a little bit the problems I actually had with Flogo. So let's kind of close all that up here and see, because I don't need all that stuff with Flogo. I need my Raspberry Pi for that. Okay, let's just talk about it and then kind of redo it and show it in reality to an extent. So the big issue was I wanted to, so all this, what you've seen here today, runs on your Raspberry Pi, comes pre-installed. I cannot install, so what I managed to do is to install Flogo on the Raspberry Pi as the command line version. So you can install Flogo command line, and then you can put JSON files in there and compile JSON files for the Pi on there. However, you cannot use the UI, the web UI on the Pi, because it only works on x86 systems. So there's one JavaScript library, Flogo, in the Flogo web UI is a lot of JavaScript part that doesn't work on ARM architectures. That took me 2 hours to figure out. So what you want to do if you want to install Flogo yourself and have the web designer, you want to use their Docker solution. So I can show you that part very quickly. So you can, so if you go on, let me show you the stuff on the website. So if you want to install Chromium yourself, you need Docker on your computer. I don't know how well that works nowadays in Windows. I think on Mac it works. In Linux it works. Mm-hmm. Even not with this now new Linux environment, isn't there some kind of hack around? Yeah, so either virtual machine or Windows 10 Professional. So if we go to Flogo, we need internet. And I think then you have to go to the getting started. Yeah. And no, I think it's the web UI. See, and then this is the Docker command you have to run. And that worked out of the box. You can, so I tried to compile Flogo, the Flogo web UI with Yarn and the specific JavaScript tools. So that runs about an hour on the Pi, and then it fails, because then it comes to a package that is only available in x86. So, but you can, with this command here, go get GitHub and so on, you can just on the Pi I have install Flogo as the command line version. Then you can design in the web UI on a Docker container, and you can take that stuff and then execute it on the Pi too. So kind of works. So I have started the Docker here, and I will just show you that I can now, so I don't need that anymore. No, also don't need that anymore, nor that. But here is the Docker thing. So I will start the Docker on my, what? No, not today. I think it has probably to do with the internet connectivity. And it might have, so I don't know. That's my theory is now it might have to do with that I was running an access point on my computer, and something with IP tables is now messed up. So maybe we really move that to the next time. Probably have to restart my computer for that. But okay, time is over anyway, so it kind of works. I've got it to run. I will show you a little example to do in Flogo. I will hope that you can, at least on the command line version of the Pi, repeat this stuff in the lab. But today we will mainly look at Node. I have to tell you what we are doing today. Yeah, we finished the Node-RED tasks we haven't even started last time. Then we want to actually move to Flogo, which might be a notch too far, but some of you are actually pretty far and have finished the Node-RED task last, so talk to me directly and we will actually try to start getting running with Flogo in the lab together, yeah? There's also, if you're super fast, some of you are, there's another framework which is pretty cool, which is called Mongoose OS. It's kind of out of the Amazon Web Services realm. And it also supports the ESP8266. So, but it's about as hard as Flogo to set up and to run. So it's really for the ambitious people. So that's why it's an optional project. It gives you nice experience, but you can do that. And if you're even faster than that, there's a really cool library for some one-wire and alternative communication things. It's called Pigeon. So you can also go to that direction. You can also swap these around. So Pigeon might be actually easier than Mongoose. Pigeon we will definitely take a look at later here in the class. Okay, thanks.